A blind woman, abandoned by her boyfriend at the park, was offered a marriage proposal by a billionaire doctor in exchange for performing surgery on her eyes. Would she accept his offer? Sierra Sullivan gripped the small gift in her hands, a nervous smile on her lips. "Happy anniversary, babe," she said softly. Andrew Adams, her boyfriend of 3 years, took a deep breath. They were seated on their favorite bench in Central Park, a place filled with memories. Sierra couldn't see the way he tensed up beside her, but she felt it. "I got you something," she continued, handing him the neatly wrapped present. "I don't know what it looks like, but my friend helped me wrap it. I bet it's beautiful." Andrew didn't open it. Instead, he placed it on her lap. Sierra frowned. "Andrew? What's wrong?" A cold breeze swept through the park, making her shiver. She heard him inhale deeply before he spoke. "Let's break up." Her heart stopped. The gift slipped from her hands, landing on the bench beside her. What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Andrew's hand pulled away from hers. "I'm getting married." Sierra's stomach twisted. "What?" "Andrew, stop joking." She reached out, trying to hold on to him, but he shifted away. "I'm not joking," he said, his voice void of emotion. "I'm getting married to someone else." Tears welled in Sierra's sightless eyes. "Did you cheat on me?" Andrew didn't answer right away. Then, coldly, he said, "I just found someone better." Sierra felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath her. "Better? You mean someone who can see?" Andrew sighed. "I've spent years taking care of you, Sierra. I need something more. A normal life." Her lips trembled. "I thought you loved me." "I thought I did too." With that, he stood up. "Wait." Sierra reached out, but all she grabbed was air. Footsteps. Fading. Leaving her alone. "Andrew, don't go." Silence. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she curled into herself. How could he leave her like this? How could he just walk away? A voice interrupted her sobs. Deep. Calm. Unfamiliar. "You don't deserve this." She froze. "Who's there?" she whispered. A moment of silence. Then the man spoke again. "I have a proposal for you." And just like that, Sierra's life changed forever. Sierra stiffened. The voice was deep, firm, and unfamiliar. It didn't carry the cold indifference of Andrew's, nor did it hold the gentle familiarity of a friend. It was something else entirely, commanding, yet oddly soothing. She turned her head in the direction of the voice, wiping at the tears staining her cheeks. Who are you?" There was a pause. Then, slow footsteps approached. Not hurried. Not hesitant. Calculated. "A man with an opportunity," he replied simply. Sierra's heart pounded. Her senses were heightened in the absence of sight, and something about the way he spoke made her uneasy. Not in a threatening way, but in the way a predator might observe its prey before striking. "I don't understand," she said cautiously. "What do you want?" "I want to help you." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Help me?" She gestured blindly in front of her. Why would a stranger suddenly appear and want to help a blind woman sitting alone in the park? Another pause. Then the voice replied, "Because I can." She frowned. That's not an answer. She heard him exhale, as if considering his next words carefully. "I saw what happened," he finally said. "I saw the way that man left you. The way he didn't even turn back." Sierra's throat tightened. The pain was still fresh, too raw to touch. "It's none of your business." "Maybe not." His voice was steady. "But I can change everything for you." A gust of wind rustled through the trees. The city around them buzzed with distant traffic, laughter, and conversations. Yet, in this moment, it felt like Sierra and this stranger were the only two people in the world. She swallowed. "What do you mean, change everything?" A chair scraped against the pavement. The man had sat down beside her. "I'm a surgeon," he said. "And not just any surgeon. I'm one of the best in the country." Sierra's breath caught. "A surgeon?" "I specialize in rare, high-risk procedures," he continued. "And I can restore your sight." For a moment, Sierra couldn't breathe. She had spent years in darkness. Years of fumbling, of relying on others, of wondering what the world truly looked like. And now, this man was saying he could give it all back to her? Her fingers clenched into fists. Why would you do that? Surgery like that. It's expensive. I can't afford it. I know. Then why? A long pause. Then he said something that made Sierra's blood run cold. Because I want you to marry me. Her body went rigid. Had she heard him correctly? What? She whispered. I will restore your sight, he repeated, his voice calm, unwavering. But in return, you will become my wife. Sierra's lips parted, but no words came out. This had to be some kind of joke. Who was this man? Why would he ask something so outrageous? Her mind reeled. I don't even know you, she said. You will, he replied simply. This is crazy. She shook her head. You're a stranger. That can change. Sierra gripped the edge of the bench. She felt like she was spiraling. Are you insane? You're asking a blind woman, who just got dumped, to marry you in exchange for a surgery? Yes. His lack of hesitation rattled her. This doesn't make sense, she continued, panic rising in her chest. You could have anyone. Why me? Silence stretched between them. Then, in a voice laced with something unreadable, he said, because I need a wife. And you need your sight. Sierra's pulse pounded in her ears. He made it sound so simple, as if this were just a business transaction. Her mind screamed at her to get up, to walk away, to tell this man he was out of his mind. But she didn't move. Because, deep down, beneath the fear and confusion, a small, dangerous part of her was tempted. Sierra sat frozen, her fingers trembling against the rough wood of the park bench. The weight of the stranger's offer settled in her chest like a stone, heavy and unshakable. Marry him? It was absurd, insane. Yet, a whisper of temptation curled through her mind. She had spent years in darkness, navigating a world she could not see, dependent on the kindness or cruelty of others. She had long since abandoned the hope of ever regaining her sight. Doctors had told her it was impossible. Surgeries were risky. Experimental procedures cost more money than she could ever dream of affording. But now, a man she had never met before was offering her everything she had ever wanted. At a price. Her voice came out unsteady. Why do you need a wife so badly? A pause. Then, the man exhaled. That's not something you need to know right now. Sierra's stomach twisted. That's not an answer. He shifted slightly beside her, and for a brief moment, she was acutely aware of his presence. He smelled of something expensive, crisp cologne and clean linen. I have my reasons, he said finally. Reasons that have nothing to do with love or romance. This is a contract. A mutually beneficial agreement. His words sent a chill down her spine. A contract. That was all this was to him. Cold. Businesslike. Sierra swallowed hard. What happens after the surgery? The man's voice was calm, measured. You will live with me as my wife for 1 year. After that, you will be free to leave. 1 year. Her hands curled into fists. It sounded simple. A fair trade. But nothing in life came without consequences. Why me? She asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. Because you have nothing to lose? The words hit her like a slap. She sucked in a sharp breath, but deep down, she knew he was right. Andrew was gone. She had no family, no wealth, no real future ahead of her. She lived paycheck to paycheck, relying on a small disability stipend that barely covered rent. She had nothing. And this man, whoever he was, had everything. He could give her a life she had only dreamed of. He could give her sight. But at what cost? Sierra's heart pounded in her chest. If she said no, she would walk away with her dignity intact. But she would remain in darkness forever. If she said yes, she would be stepping into the unknown, bound to a stranger for an entire year. Her lips parted, and before she could stop herself, she whispered, "Who are you?" The man beside her chuckled softly. "I was wondering when you'd ask." He stood, and Sierra felt a warm hand gently grasp her own. His touch was firm but not rough. "My name is Dr. Sebastian Cole." The name sent a shock through her. Even in her world of darkness, she had heard of him. Dr. Sebastian Cole was one of the most powerful, elusive surgeons in the city. A billionaire with a reputation shrouded in mystery. Rumors swirled about him. Stories of his brilliance, his wealth, and the secrets buried beneath his cold, emotionless exterior. Sierra's pulse quickened. Why would a man like him choose her? Sebastian's voice pulled her from her thoughts. You don't have to answer now, but you don't have much time to decide. Her breath hitched. How much time do I have? 24 hours. Her stomach clenched. One day to make the biggest decision of her life. Sebastian gently placed something in her hand, a business card. When you make up your mind, call me. Sierra clutched the card tightly, her fingers brushing against the raised letters of his name. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Sierra sat there long after he had gone, the cold wind biting at her skin, her heart pounding. 24 hours. A decision that could change everything. And she had no idea what to do. Sierra barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, Sebastian's voice echoed in her mind. I will restore your sight, but in return, you will become my wife. She tossed and turned, clutching the business card he had given her. It felt like a lifeline, one she wasn't sure if she should grab or throw away. Morning came too quickly. She sat by the small window of her cramped apartment, feeling the sun's warmth on her face. If she accepted Sebastian's offer, this might be the last time she ever woke up in this tiny space. But what was she trading for that? She thought of Andrew, of the way he had walked away from her so easily. I just found someone better. Her jaw clenched. Better. What would he say if he found out she had married a billionaire? Would he regret leaving her? Would he finally see her as enough? Sierra shook her head. She shouldn't be thinking about Andrew. This decision had nothing to do with him. It was about her. A chance to see. A chance to live differently. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone and dialed the number. It rang twice before a familiar, deep voice answered. You've made your decision. It wasn't a question. Sierra swallowed. Yes. A brief pause. And she inhaled sharply. Then, with a steady voice, she said, I'll marry you. The words tasted foreign on her tongue. Sebastian didn't react. No excitement. No relief. Just cold efficiency. Good, he said. Be ready in an hour. Sierra blinked. An hour? I'll send someone to pick you up. And just like that, the call ended. Sierra stared at her phone, heart hammering. This was real. This was happening. She had an hour to pack up her life. Not that she had much to take. With shaking hands, she grabbed a small suitcase and stuffed in a few clothes. Nothing fancy, just what she had. She ran her fingers over the few personal items she owned. But there was no point in bringing anything sentimental. This wasn't a love story. This was a deal. Exactly 1 hour later, Sierra stood at the entrance of her small apartment, gripping the handle of her worn-out suitcase. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Was she really doing this? Before she could second-guess herself, a car pulled up outside. Even without sight, she could hear the smooth, near-silent hum of an expensive engine. This wasn't just any car. It was luxury. A soft knock on her door made her jump. Miss Sullivan? A professional-sounding voice asked. Sierra swallowed. Yes? I'm here to take you to Dr. Cole. Her grip on her suitcase tightened. There was no turning back now. She took a deep breath, stepping outside for the last time. The air felt different, heavier, charged with something she couldn't name. A stranger gently took her suitcase, guiding her toward the waiting car. The scent of leather and newness greeted her as she slid into the back seat. As the car pulled away, Sierra let out a slow breath. This was it. She was leaving her old life behind. A new world. The drive was long and silent, the air inside thick with unspoken questions. Sierra fidgeted with her fingers. Where are we going? To Dr. Cole's estate, the driver replied. Estate. Not a house. Not an apartment. An estate. The realization made her stomach twist. She had agreed to this marriage knowing nothing about the life she was stepping into. 30 minutes later, the car slowed. Even without sight, she could feel the change in atmosphere. The air was calmer, the world quieter. The tires crunched over gravel, and a few moments later, the door beside her opened. We've arrived, Miss Sullivan. A strong, unfamiliar hand took hers, guiding her out. She stood still for a moment, trying to absorb her surroundings through sound and touch. The wind was softer here, the air cooler. The faint sound of water, maybe a fountain, trickled nearby. Then came another sound, footsteps. Steady, unhurried. She didn't need to be told who they belonged to. Sebastian. I see you've made it, his deep voice said, smooth as ever. Sierra straightened, trying to mask her nerves. I said I would. She heard him step closer. Come inside. A hand, firm and confident, touched her lower back, guiding her forward. The warmth of it sent a shiver through her. Sierra clenched her jaw. This was not a love story. She had to remember that. As she stepped through the grand entrance of Sebastian Cole's world, she had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she never expected. Sierra stepped inside. The faint scent of polished wood, expensive cologne, and something unfamiliar surrounding her. The air in the estate felt different, quieter, almost suffocating in its stillness. She heard the door close behind her, the click echoing through what she imagined to be a massive space. Sebastian's presence was impossible to ignore. He was close, too close. You're quiet, he observed. Sierra swallowed, shifting slightly. She hesitated, fingers gripping the strap of her bag. I don't know what's expected of me. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, Sebastian spoke. You will follow my rules, Sierra. His voice was calm but firm, leaving no room for argument. This marriage is an agreement, and I need you to understand the terms. Sierra exhaled slowly. I'm listening. She felt him move, leading her forward. Her shoes clicked against marble floors, the sound bouncing off high ceilings. You will live here as my wife for 1 year, Sebastian continued. During that time, you will attend functions with me, play the role expected of you, and follow my lead. Sierra's stomach clenched. Functions? I'm a public figure. People will have questions. We have to be convincing. She nodded slowly. What else? Sebastian stopped walking. She heard the rustle of paper, then the unmistakable sound of a document being placed on a table. A contract, he said. It outlines everything. Sierra hesitated before reaching out, her fingers brushing the smooth surface of the paper. It felt thick, expensive. Sebastian's voice softened slightly. You'll also undergo the surgery within the month. Her breath hitched. The surgery. The very reason she was here. A tremor ran through her fingers as she traced the edges of the document. A year of her life in exchange for something she had thought she'd never have. She didn't need to see to know that Sebastian was watching her closely. Do you have any questions? He asked. Sierra swallowed. What happens after the year is up? A pause. Then we part ways. His voice held no emotion. You'll be free to go. Sierra's chest tightened, though she wasn't sure why. No strings. No attachments. Just a contract. She took a deep breath and reached for the pen beside the document. If this was the price of regaining her sight, she would pay it. With a steady hand, she signed her name. The deal was done, and there was no turning back. The next morning, Sierra woke up in a bed far too large, covered in silk sheets that felt nothing like the worn fabric she was used to. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. The past day had been a whirlwind. Leaving her tiny apartment, stepping into this cold, luxurious mansion, and signing away a year of her life. And now, today was her wedding day. A wedding without love. She sat up, running her fingers over the soft material of her nightgown. She had expected to feel excitement, maybe nervousness. Instead, all she felt was numb. A gentle knock on the door made her tense. Come in, she said hesitantly. The door opened, and a woman's voice, kind but professional, greeted her. Good morning, Miss Sullivan. I'm Elise, Dr. Cole's assistant. I'll be helping you get ready. Sierra forced a small smile. You can call me Sierra. Elise moved closer, and Sierra felt the woman take her hand, helping her stand. Your dress is ready, Elise said. Would you like me to describe it to you? Sierra hesitated. She wanted to say yes, but something inside her ached at the thought. What was the point? She wouldn't be able to see it, wouldn't be able to admire herself in the mirror like other brides did. No, that's okay, she murmured. Elise didn't push. Instead, she helped Sierra into a chair, guiding her hands to the fabric. Sierra ran her fingers over the dress, feeling the intricate embroidery, the delicate lace. It felt beautiful, but all she could think about was how it wasn't hers. Nothing about this day belonged to her. Not the dress, not the groom, not even the decision to be here. It was all borrowed, all temporary, an empty I do. The ceremony was small and private, held in Sebastian's estate. There were no guests, no family members, just a few witnesses and a judge. Sierra stood beside Sebastian, her hands clasped in front of her as the judge read the vows. She barely heard the words. This was just a formality. Sebastian's voice was calm, steady as he said, I do. Then it was her turn. Sierra's throat tightened. She wasn't sure why. This wasn't real. And yet, for some reason, her heart ached. I do, she whispered. The words felt foreign on her tongue. A moment later, Sebastian slipped a ring onto her finger. It was cold, heavy, a symbol of a marriage that wasn't real. You may kiss the bride, the judge announced. Sierra's breath hitched. A kiss? Her pulse quickened as she felt Sebastian shift beside her. Then, warm fingers tilted her chin up. His touch was gentle, but firm, like everything about him. And then, for the briefest moment, his lips brushed against hers. Soft, barely there. And yet, it sent a strange shiver through her. When he pulled away, Sierra felt the absence of his warmth more than she expected. The ceremony ended, and just like that, she was no longer Sierra Sullivan. She was Sierra Cole, a bride, a wife, but not a woman in love. And she had no idea what came next. The moment the ceremony ended, Sierra expected to feel different. Maybe she thought she'd feel like a new person, stepping into a new life. But instead, she felt the same. No warmth, no joy, just the cold weight of reality settling in. She was now Mrs. Sierra Cole, but it meant nothing. Sebastian didn't touch her as they walked back inside the estate. No hand on her back, no whispered words. If anything, he felt colder now than before. As if this entire thing had been just another business deal. And maybe, for him, it was. The wedding night that wasn't. Sierra sat at the edge of the massive bed in what was now her room. Or at least, that's what Elise had told her when she led her inside after the ceremony. You and Dr. Cole will have separate rooms, she had explained, her voice careful. Sierra wasn't sure if she felt relieved or insulted. Not that she expected romance. But wasn't it strange? A newlywed bride sleeping alone on her wedding night? She sighed, running her fingers along the smooth sheets. This room, like the rest of the house, felt too much. Too big, too elegant, too foreign. She was used to tiny spaces, to the comforting clutter of things she knew by touch. Here, she felt lost. A soft knock on the door startled her. Before she could respond, the door opened, and she felt his presence before he even spoke. Sebastian, her new husband, are you comfortable? His voice was unreadable, emotionless. Sierra straightened. Yes. A pause. Then, good. Silence stretched between them. Sierra's fingers tightened around the blanket. This is strange, isn't it? She said, forcing a small laugh. What is this? She motioned vaguely. Everything. We're married, but it doesn't feel like it. Sebastian was quiet for a moment before responding. That was the agreement, wasn't it? His words stung more than she expected. She nodded. Right. Sebastian shifted. If you need anything, ask Elise. It was such a formal way to speak to a wife. But then again, she wasn't really his wife. Just a woman he made a deal with. As he turned to leave, Sierra suddenly asked, Why me? Sebastian stopped. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, in a voice so quiet she barely caught it, he said, Because you don't ask too many questions. And with that, he walked away, leaving Sierra alone on their wedding night. And for the first time, she wondered if she had made a mistake. The next morning, Sierra woke up to silence. No morning traffic outside her window. No neighbors arguing. No creaky pipes from her old apartment. Just pure, suffocating silence. She lay in bed, the softest sheets she had ever felt wrapped around her. Everything about this place was too perfect. The air smelled fresh, almost unnaturally so. The walls didn't carry the history of past tenants, no faint memories of laughter or sorrow. It was a house with no soul. And now, it was her home. A life of luxury and loneliness. Sierra carefully got out of bed, her bare feet meeting cold marble. "Elise," she called hesitantly. The door opened almost instantly, as if Elise had been waiting. "Good morning, Mrs. Cole." Sierra stiffened at the title. Mrs. Cole. It sounded foreign. I don't know what I'm supposed to do," she admitted. "What's expected of me?" Elise hesitated. "Dr. Cole has already left for work. He said you should rest and settle in. That was it? She was just supposed to sit around and wait?" Sierra clenched her fists. She didn't like this. She had spent most of her life being independent, figuring things out on her own. Now, she was in a world where everything was handed to her, yet she had no control. "What if I want to leave the house?" she asked. A pause. "You can," Elise said carefully, "but you'll need security with you." Sierra frowned. "Why?" "For your safety, of course." Something about the way Elise said it made Sierra uneasy. Was it really for her safety? Or was it to keep her from leaving the world she can't see? After breakfast, Elise offered to show Sierra around the house. Room after room, Sierra ran her fingers over the expensive furniture, the carved wooden railings, the smooth, cold walls. She tried to picture it in her mind. The grand staircase Elise described, the chandelier that sparkled above, the paintings that hung in the halls, art she would never see. She was surrounded by luxury, yet all she felt was trapped. "I'd like to go outside," Sierra said suddenly. Elise hesitated but nodded. "Of course." She led Sierra through a set of glass doors. The moment she stepped outside, a cool breeze brushed against her skin. The air smelled different, crisper, cleaner. And then, the sound of water. A fountain. Sierra followed the sound, reaching out carefully until her fingers brushed against the smooth stone. Her heart clenched. Even though she couldn't see it, she knew it was beautiful. She had always loved water. The way it moved, the way it sounded. And soon, she would be able to see it. If Sebastian kept his promise. If this marriage didn't come with a price she wasn't prepared to pay. She had no idea that in just a few days, she would begin to uncover secrets that would make her question everything. That night, Sierra lay in bed, staring into the darkness she had known her whole life. Sebastian hadn't come home yet. Or if he hadn't made his presence known. She thought marriage, no matter how arranged or transactional, came with at least some level of companionship. But Sebastian was like a ghost in his own home. Elise had told her he was busy. But busy with what? Sierra turned onto her side, feeling the weight of the ring on her finger. It was too heavy, too foreign. And for the first time since agreeing to this deal, doubt began creeping into her mind. Somewhere deep in the night, the sound of footsteps woke her. Not hers. Not Elise's. Someone else. She sat up, her heart pounding. Who's there? Silence. For a long moment, she thought she had imagined it. But then, a voice, low and unfamiliar, murmured from the hallway. She strained to listen. It wasn't Sebastian. It wasn't Elise. It was someone else. And they weren't alone. The whispers were hushed but urgent. Something about the tone sent a shiver through her. Sierra swung her legs over the bed, standing carefully. She didn't know this house, didn't know which direction was safe, or which would lead her straight into danger. But something in her gut told her that whatever was happening wasn't normal. She stepped toward the door, pressing her ear against it. The voices grew clearer. "She doesn't know anything yet," a man said. A pause. Then another voice, this one lower, colder. "She can't find out." Sierra's breath hitched. Were they talking about her? She took a step back, her heart racing. Then, silence. The whispers stopped. And then, footsteps. Coming toward her room. Sierra's entire body tensed. She backed away from the door, her pulse pounding in her ears. Who were they? And what didn't they want her to know? Her fingers clenched around the bedsheets as the footsteps stopped just outside her door. A long, tense moment passed. Then, nothing. No knock. No sound. Just an eerie, suffocating silence. But Sierra knew one thing for certain. She was not alone in this house. And someone, Maybe even Sebastian himself was hiding something from her. Something she wasn't meant to find out. Sierra barely slept that night. Even after the footsteps disappeared, even after the house returned to its eerie silence, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been right outside her door, listening, waiting. She was used to darkness, but this was different. This was not knowing what surrounded her, what secrets hid in the walls of this house. And most of all, who she had really married. A suspicious housekeeper. The next morning, Sierra sat at the breakfast table, untouched food in front of her. Elise placed a cup of tea beside her. "You didn't sleep well," Elise observed. Sierra hesitated. No. She wanted to ask about the voices, about the footsteps, but something told her Elise wouldn't answer. Instead, she chose her words carefully. "Elise, how long have you worked for Dr. Cole?" A pause. Then, a long time. Sierra picked at the napkin on her lap. "And before me? Did he ever bring anyone else here?" Another pause. Then, Elise responded, but this time, her voice was too careful. "You're his wife now. That's what matters." Sierra's grip tightened around her fork. That wasn't an answer. Before she could press further, Elise suddenly stood. "There are some areas of the house you should avoid, Mrs. Cole. For your own safety." Sierra stiffened. "Like what?" Elise hesitated, then lowered her voice. "The West Wing." Sierra's heartbeat quickened. "The West Wing?" Elise cleared her throat. "It's restricted. Dr. Cole prefers his privacy." Sierra forced a small smile, but inside, her mind was spinning. The West Wing. The same direction she had heard the voices coming from last night. Sierra knew one thing for sure. Whatever was hidden there was something Sebastian didn't want her to find out. A door that won't open. That evening, after making sure Elise was nowhere near, Sierra decided to explore. Her fingers traced along the walls as she walked, feeling her way through the unfamiliar corridors. The house was too quiet, every step she took echoing in the vast emptiness. Then, finally, she reached the West Wing. Her hand found a door. She reached for the handle, turned it, locked. Her stomach tightened. Why was this room locked when every other door in the house was open? She pressed her ear against the wood. Silence. But she knew something was behind it. And now, she was more determined than ever to find out what. Because whatever Sebastian Cole was hiding, it had something to do with her. Sierra stood in front of the locked door, her heart pounding. The West Wing. The place she wasn't supposed to go. The door felt solid beneath her fingertips, its surface cold and unmoving. But something about it sent a shiver down her spine. Like touching something forbidden. Why was it locked? What was behind it? Sierra pressed her ear against the wood, straining to hear anything. But there was only silence. She exhaled slowly. "I can't do anything now. But this isn't over." She turned away, deciding to return to her room before someone found her wandering. But as she walked back through the hall, she realized something. If there was a locked door, then there had to be a key. A hidden discovery. The next day, Sierra started searching. She had to be careful. She knew Elise watched her closely, and Sebastian, wherever he was already hiding something. If they suspected she was snooping, she might never get the chance to figure out what was really happening in this house. She started with the obvious places. Desks, drawers, cabinets. Nothing. Then she thought about Sebastian's office. Elise had led her past it once, and Sierra remembered the faint scent of books and something clinical, like antiseptic. Late that night, when the house had fallen into its usual silence, Sierra made her move. She walked carefully, her fingers tracing the walls to guide her. She reached the office door, turned the handle, unlocked. A small thrill rushed through her as she slipped inside. The room smelled exactly as she remembered. Leather, old paper, and something sharp and sterile. She ran her hands along the surface of the desk, feeling for anything that could be a key. Then, her fingers brushed against something metallic. A small key. She picked it up, her heart racing. Could this be it? Could this be the key to the locked door? She had no way of knowing. Not yet. But one thing was certain. Whatever Sebastian was hiding, she was getting closer to the truth. And she had no idea if she was ready for what she was about to uncover. Sierra gripped the small key tightly in her hand, as she made her way back to the West Wing. Her heart pounded with each step. She knew this was dangerous. If Elise, or worse, Sebastian caught her, she had no idea how they would react. But she had to know. Why was there a locked door in a house that was supposed to be hers now? And why was she warned to stay away from it? The door opens. When she reached the West Wing, she paused, pressing her back against the cold wall. The hallway was silent. No footsteps. No whispers. Just her and the unknown. Taking a deep breath, she reached out and slid the key into the lock. For a second, nothing happened. Then, click. The door unlocked. Sierra hesitated. Every part of her told her to stop, to turn around, to pretend she never found the key. But another part, the part that had been abandoned in a park, the part that had been betrayed by the man she loved, the part that refused to live in ignorance, pushed forward. She turned the knob. The door creaked open, and the first thing she noticed was the smell. Something old, stale, like the air hadn't moved in years. Sierra stepped inside cautiously, her hands out in front of her, feeling the space. The room was large. She reached forward and her fingers brushed against something, a chair, then a desk. It felt like an office. But why would Sebastian lock an office? She took another step inside, her pulse hammering. Her fingers grazed the surface of the desk, moving carefully. Papers, books, and then something metal, cold. She picked it up. It was a picture frame. She traced her fingers along the edges, then over the glass. There was a photo inside. Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't see it, but she knew it was important. She ran her fingers over the glass again, searching for details, for anything that could tell her what she was holding. But before she could figure it out, a voice cut through the silence. Sierra. She froze. The voice was cold, familiar. Sebastian. She turned sharply, her pulse spiking. He was standing in the doorway. She didn't know how long he had been there, but from the quiet, controlled rage in his voice, she knew one thing. She had just made a mistake. Sierra's breath hitched as Sebastian stepped forward, his footsteps slow and deliberate. The door creaked shut behind him, trapping her inside with him. She gripped the picture frame tighter, her fingers trembling. Sebastian, her voice came out uneven. I can explain. Silence. Then, in a voice dangerously calm, he asked, "What are you doing in here?" Sierra's mind raced. She couldn't see his expression, but she could feel the tension in the air. She took a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. But what could she say? That she didn't trust him? That she knew he was hiding something? Her grip tightened around the frame. "I was just curious." Curious? His voice held no emotion, but somehow, that made it worse. Sierra swallowed hard. "Yes. I don't know much about this house. About you." She lifted the frame slightly. "I don't even know what this is." Sebastian was silent for a moment. Then she heard him move closer. Her muscles tensed as his warm fingers gently pried the frame from her hands. She expected him to snap at her, to get angry, to throw it aside. But instead, he let out a long, tired sigh. "I suppose you were bound to find out sooner or later." Sierra frowned. "Find out what?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, she heard the faint rustle of movement, then the unmistakable sound of him placing the frame back down on the desk. Sebastian exhaled, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "This room belonged to my wife." Sierra felt her heart drop. What? He didn't repeat himself, but he didn't have to. Sierra's mind reeled. His wife? Was he still married? No, that couldn't be. She had married him. Unless she wasn't the first. A cold realization settled over her. Sebastian, she whispered. What happened to her? For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, finally, she's gone. Gone. The words sent a shiver down her spine. It was the way he said it. Not she left. Not we divorced. Just gone. Sierra felt something dark creep into her chest. She had so many questions. But deep down, she wasn't sure she wanted the answers. Because suddenly, this marriage, this entire deal, felt more like a trap than a second chance. And now, she wasn't sure if she had married a savior, or a man with dangerous secrets? Sierra's fingers curled into fists as she processed Sebastian's words. She's gone. Not, she moved away. Not, we divorced. Just gone. The air in the room felt heavier now, thick with unspoken truths. Sierra forced herself to speak. What do you mean? Sebastian hesitated. It's complicated. A bitter laugh slipped from her lips. Complicated? I woke up blind one day, and my boyfriend abandoned me in a park. That's complicated. So tell me, Sebastian, where is she? Silence. Then, finally, she died. The words were so quiet, so measured, that Sierra almost missed them. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. Sebastian had been married before, and his wife was dead. The room suddenly felt colder. Sierra took a step back, even though she couldn't see where she was going. How? Another long pause. Then, Sebastian exhaled. An accident. His voice was steady, but something about it felt off. Sierra's mind raced. She barely knew this man. She had married him because she was desperate, because she had no other options. And now, she was standing in a locked room, his dead wife's room, holding on to secrets she wasn't supposed to uncover. Sierra swallowed hard. Why did you lock this room? Sebastian's jaw tensed. Because some things should stay in the past. His words sent a chill down her spine. A part of her wanted to believe him, to let this go and pretend she hadn't found the key. But another part of her, one that had been growing ever since she stepped into this house, told her something wasn't right. She needed to know more. But she also needed to be careful. Because if Sebastian was hiding something, then she might be in more danger than she realized. Sierra could hear the finality in Sebastian's voice, but it didn't ease the tension in her chest. Some things should stay in the past. But why? What was he so desperate to keep buried? Her fingers twitched at her sides. If she kept pushing, would she get answers? Or put herself in danger? Sebastian suddenly stepped closer. She could feel the warmth of his presence, the way his breath slightly disturbed the air between them. You shouldn't have come in here, Sierra. His voice was low, controlled. She swallowed hard. It's my house too. Sebastian was silent for a moment. Then he let out a quiet sigh. That's true. Sierra wasn't expecting that answer. For a second, she almost believed that maybe, he would tell her the truth. But then, I want you to promise me something. She stiffened. What? Sebastian's voice darkened. Stay out of this room. Sierra's pulse quickened. Why? I don't want you hurting yourself. His words sent a chill down her spine. It was the way he said it. So gentle, so protective. But beneath the surface, there was something else. Something unsettling. Was it really about protecting her? Or was it about protecting himself? Sierra's lips parted, but before she could speak, Sebastian placed something in her hands. She flinched. It was the picture frame, the one she had picked up when she first entered the room. Sebastian held it there for a second, as if silently asking her to feel it, to acknowledge it. Then, softly, he said, this was her favorite place. Sierra ran her fingers over the glass. She couldn't see the image, but she imagined a woman. Someone beautiful, someone loved, someone who had been here before her, and someone who was now gone. Her throat felt dry. What was her name? Sebastian hesitated. Eleanor. Eleanor. The name sent a strange sensation through Sierra, a sense of finality, a whisper of something lost. Sebastian gently took the frame from her hands. This room stays locked from now on. She knew it wasn't a request. It was a warning. And Sierra had a sinking feeling that if she didn't listen, she might not like what she found next. That night, Sierra couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her mind racing. Sebastian's warning echoed in her head. This room stays locked from now on. But why? Why was he so desperate to keep her away from his past? And why did she feel like the truth was far more terrifying than anything she could imagine? Sierra turned onto her side, gripping the covers. The house was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like someone, was watching. Then she heard it. A sound. A whisper. It was faint, almost like the wind, but it was there, coming from beyond her door. Sierra froze. She strained to listen. A voice. Soft. Almost familiar. Her heart pounded. Could it be Elise? Or was it someone else? Slowly, Sierra sat up, her breath shallow. She reached out and felt for the edge of the bed, steadying herself before moving toward the door. The whispering continued, and then, just as she reached for the handle, it stopped. Sierra's entire body tensed. The silence was worse than the sound itself. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, just as she was about to step back, thump, a loud noise came from the west wing. Sierra's pulse spiked. The locked room, the one Sebastian had warned her about. Someone, was inside. She swallowed hard, her fingers trembling against the door handle. She had two choices. Ignore it. Pretend she didn't hear anything. Go back to bed and live in blissful ignorance. Or, find out what was really happening in this house. Sierra took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. The hallway was deathly silent. Sierra hesitated just outside her room, her breath shallow. The air was thick with something she couldn't name. Something unseen, yet present. She listened. Nothing. But she knew what she had heard. A whisper. A thump. Something, or someone, was in the west wing. Slowly, she took a step forward. Her bare feet met the cold marble floor, sending a shiver up her spine. One step. Another. The hallway stretched before her like an endless void. She ran her fingers along the wall, guiding herself toward the forbidden door. And then, footsteps. Soft. Behind her. Sierra's heart nearly stopped. She froze. For a long moment, she didn't breathe. Then, tap, tap. The sound was faint but unmistakable. Someone was there. Watching. Following. Sierra swallowed hard, trying to convince herself she was imagining things. But when she turned her head slightly, the footsteps stopped. A slow, creeping terror wrapped around her. She wasn't alone. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she forced herself to move forward. The door to the west wing was close now. Just a few more steps. And then, a voice. Low. Almost a whisper. Right behind her. Sierra. A cold chill shot through her entire body. She spun around, heart hammering. But there was nothing. No one. Just darkness. Sierra's breath came in sharp gasps. Her body trembled. She had heard it. Someone had said her name. But no one was there. And then, the locked door to the west wing creaked open. On its own. Sierra's breath hitched. The door to the west wing, the locked door, had just creaked open. By itself. Her mind screamed for her to run. But her body wouldn't move. She gripped the wall for balance, trying to make sense of what was happening. Sebastian had warned her not to come here. Had he known this would happen? The house was silent, but the air felt heavy, like something unseen was pressing against her skin. She swallowed hard and stepped forward. The door stood ajar, an invitation into the unknown. With trembling fingers, she reached out and pushed it open. The hinges groaned. Cold air rushed past her, making her shiver. The scent of dust and something faintly floral filled her nose. Sierra hesitated, listening. No footsteps. No whispers. Just the unsettling silence. Slowly, she stepped inside. The air inside the room was different. Stale. Frozen in time. She ran her fingers along the edge of a wooden table. Papers. A small box. Then, a silk scarf. She lifted it, running her hands over the smooth fabric. It felt expensive. Delicate. Was it hers? Or did it belong to Eleanor? A sick feeling twisted in her stomach. Everything in this room had been left untouched. Like a shrine. She took another cautious step forward. And then, the door slammed shut behind her. Sierra gasped and spun around. Her hands flew to the door handle. She pulled. It wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at her chest. She was trapped. And then, a whisper. Right next to her ear. You shouldn't be here. Sierra's scream caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, her pulse thundering. There was no one else in the room. And yet, she felt the presence of something. Something that did not want her here. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the whisper was gone, leaving Sierra alone in the dark. Sierra's fingers trembled as she yanked at the door handle. Locked. Her pulse pounded in her ears, her breath coming in short gasps. Someone, or something, had spoken to her. "You shouldn't be here." The words still clung to the air, chilling her to the bone. She pressed her back against the door, straining to hear any sound in the suffocating silence. Nothing, but she felt it. A presence. Unseen, but there. Her body was screaming at her to escape, but the door wouldn't open. Sierra swallowed hard. She had to think. She took a deep breath and turned toward the room again. It smelled of perfume, faint, floral, familiar, like someone had been here just moments ago. But this room had been locked for years, hadn't it? Sierra's fingers brushed the surface of the vanity table. A jewelry box, a bottle of perfume, a folded letter. She hesitated. Should she open it? She reached out. Then, a rustling sound. Behind her. She froze. Her skin prickled. Someone else was in the room. Or something. Sierra's breath hitched as she slowly turned her head. And then, the closet door creaked open. By itself. A soft tap, tap, tap echoed as something inside shifted. Sierra's stomach clenched. She couldn't see, but she knew. She was not alone. A whisper drifted through the air. "Leave before it's too late." Sierra's body went cold. The door handle behind her suddenly rattled. And then, click, the lock released. She didn't wait, didn't hesitate. Sierra turned, flung the door open, and ran. Down the hall, through the darkness. Her breath came in frantic gasps as she reached her room and slammed the door shut. Her heart thundered as she pressed her back against it. She was shaking. That voice, that warning. It wasn't just in her head. Someone, or something, had let her out. And whatever it was, didn't want her in that room. But why? And what would happen if she went back? Sierra wasn't sure she wanted to know. But deep inside, she already did. This house held secrets. And she had just unlocked the first one. Sierra sat on the edge of her bed, gripping the blankets so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breath came in slow, measured gasps, but no matter how much she tried to calm herself, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on her like a crushing force. The whisper, the locked door, the unseen presence in that room. Leave before it's too late. She couldn't ignore it, but she also couldn't explain it. Sierra reached for the glass of water on her nightstand, but her hands were still shaking. She barely managed to lift it to her lips before setting it back down. She needed to think. She needed answers. But where would she even start? Sebastian. A chill ran through her. Had he known all along? She clenched her jaw. Of course he had. That was why he kept the door locked. Why he had been so insistent that she stay away. But why? What was he hiding? She had to find out. Sierra wiped her damp palms on her nightgown, then reached for her phone. She hesitated for a second before unlocking it. She could call Sebastian, demand the truth. But would he even tell her? Or would he give her another half answer? Another vague warning? Her thumb hovered over his contact before she pulled back. No. She needed to investigate on her own. Sierra took a deep breath, steeling herself. If she wanted the truth, she had to find it herself. She turned her attention back to the West Wing. There had been something in that room. Something connected to Eleanor. But what? Sierra's mind raced. The scarf. The perfume. The folded letter. The letter. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't had the chance to read it before the door had slammed shut. What if it contained the answers she needed? Sierra's fingers twitched. Could she go back? Dare she go back? The memory of the whisper sent a shiver down her spine. You shouldn't be here. Her throat went dry. Maybe she shouldn't go back. Maybe she should listen to the warning and stay away. But she knew herself too well. She had to know the truth. Sierra's heart pounded as she stood up. The house was eerily quiet now. She slowly made her way toward the door, pressing her ear against it. Silence. No footsteps. No whispers. But the presence still lingered. She could feel it. Taking a deep breath, she turned the doorknob and stepped out into the hallway. The air felt heavier. She moved carefully, feeling her way along the wall, her pulse hammering in her chest. The West Wing loomed ahead of her. Her fingers grazed the edge of the doorframe, the wood still cool beneath her touch. The door was still unlocked. Her stomach twisted. Had someone else entered after she left? Or had it been left open for her? She pushed it open. The scent of faded perfume hit her instantly. The room was still, frozen in time. Sierra took a step inside, her breathing shallow. The letter. She reached out, feeling across the vanity until her fingers brushed against the crisp paper. She lifted it carefully, her heart racing. The edges were slightly worn, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. She ran her fingers over the surface, then slowly opened it. Her hands trembled as she traced the faint indentations of ink on the paper. The words. They were written with urgency, with fear. And then, her fingertips stopped on a single line, one that sent ice through her veins. If anything happens to me, know that it was Sebastian. Sierra gasped, nearly dropping the letter. Her knees went weak. No, this couldn't be real. Her mind spun, her heart thudding wildly against her ribs. Sebastian, her husband, the man who had saved her, the man who had married her, and now, the man who might have killed his first wife. Sierra staggered back, her breath ragged. She had been desperate when she agreed to this marriage. But had she just married a murderer? A chill ran down her spine. She had to get out. She had to run. But before she could even turn, the door slammed shut behind her. And this time, she knew she wasn't alone.